From the set of numbers, -2, the square root of 3, 4, 7, and 9, write down a prime number. Now, what is a prime number? A prime number is a number that only has two factors, 1 and itself. And prime numbers starts at 2, okay? And so let's list some prime numbers. And so we have 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29, and 31. So these are some examples of prime numbers. And so they want us to write down a prime number. And so the answer here is definitely going to be 7. Notice that 7 is a prime number and 7 is part of the set of numbers. Next, let's move on to this next question. It says, write down an irrational number. Now, first of all, let us figure out, or let us outline what is an irrational number. Now, an irrational number, according to this definition, it states that irrational numbers are real numbers that cannot be expressed as a simple fraction or ratio of two integers, and their decimal representations are non-terminating and non-repeating. So two things. For irrational numbers, you cannot express them as a simple fraction, like 2 over 4, 3 over 5. You cannot express an irrational number in that way. So an irrational number cannot be expressed as a fraction of two integers. So all fractions are not irrational numbers. So if it's a fraction, it's not an irrational number. If it's a fraction of two integers, I should say, it's not an irrational number. Now, and their decimal representations are non-terminating and non-repeating, which means that if you have a decimal number that is an irrational number, that means that that decimal number, in order for it to be an irrational number, it must be non-terminating, which means it never stops, and it must be non-repeating, which means that it shouldn't have a repeating pattern or a consistent pattern that repeats. So for irrational numbers, when we're looking at their decimal representation never stops, so it continues on, and it doesn't have a consistent pattern. And so if we look at -2, square root of 3, 4, 7, and 9, which one of these is an irrational number? Let's consider the square root of 3. Now, if we look at the square root of 3 and we write it as in terms of a decimal, this is going to be 1.732050807757 and so on. So it does not stop, so it continues, all right? And it's non-repeating because this decimal doesn't have a pattern, a consistent pattern that it follows. And so that means that the square root of 3 is an irrational number from the set of numbers. Next, the question states, from the set of numbers, write down a number less than 0. So the correct answer is definitely going to be -2. -2 is less than 0, and -2 is less than 0. In fact, all negative numbers are less than 0, and so the correct answer here is definitely -2. The rest of these numbers are positive, and so the correct answer here is -2. Next, the question wants us to determine or write down a multiple of 3 and 9. So that has to be a multiple of 3 and a multiple of 9. And so let's list the multiples of 3. Multiples of 3 are 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30, and so on. Multiples of 9 are 9, 18, 27, 36, 45, 54, 63, 72, and so on. And so a multiple of 3 and 9 is definitely going to be 9. So 9 is a multiple of 3 and 9. And so the answer here is definitely 9.